let's just get started, and then anyone joining later can do that. So looking at the cost comparison fees versus MBS, this is not to say one is better than the other. They're both gold standards. We're not, making a clinical judgment here why fees is better or sometimes better or MBS sometimes better. We're looking at those cases where you can really use either as an instrumental assessment, fees or MBS, and those cases where fees might be the better option, but MBS is the only one available, because that is often what happens, right? I mean, acute care setting, if you do instrumentals, likely they're being done as modified barium swallows, and then you might find yourself in the situation where you want to show that it is a good idea to have fees equipment as well to do that as an instrumental. So we're going to start off from an acute care perspective. So, in a hospital, there's MBS being done in radiology for the instrumentals, but there's no fees equipment. And now we're going to look at the cost differences, and we will find out that when you do fees, and even though you're buying equipment, you're saving money, and that money of course helps the hospital, and we're going to show how those cost savings can justify the equipment purchase. We have to do it that way because of consolidated billing, right? Because if you're in a setting where it's all like Medicare A and not you're not dealing with specific codes where you get a specific reimbursement, then through the cost savings is how you want to illustrate these things. So let's go ahead and fill out this tool. The tool really has these yellow fields that you fill out, and what you need to do is you need to go out there and find the numbers that are applicable for your facility. So you want to talk to your administration and kind of find the right numbers here. All right, so first one here is the demand for instrumental assessments, right? How many instrumentals are needed per month? Again, we are kind of talking about the ones that could be done either as an MBS or as a fees, or where fees is preferred, not so much the ones where it has to be an MBS. So, let's say we would have something like 30 studies per month that we have the demand for. We'll put in a 30 right here, then go to the next field. Now, this is option full service mobile provider. So this is a mobile fees provider, for example, that comes to a facility, does the study there, and leaves the report and brings all the equipment and everything. Same is possible with modified barium swallow, where one of those MBS trucks in an acute care setting, and that's sort of what we're looking at right now. This is not as applicable, so we're just going to leave it at 0 for both of those. Then we're going to get to the equipment. So on the fee side, of course, your speech pathology department, you need to purchase equipment or lease equipment or rent equipment. We're going to start with the option of buying equipment. All right, so the first question here is the equipment life expectancy in years. And I usually like to say at least 10 years, because for 10 years, we would say that we definitely are going to have the spare parts available. We are able to repair the equipment, and it's not going to be end of life and all of that. So you have at least 10 years. That doesn't mean that you can't use the equipment for more than 10 years, but 10 years is sort of the guarantee. And maybe at that time, technology has changed in a way that you want to update anyway. So we're going to go with 10 years. So I'll put 10 in here. Now, when it comes to the equipment for MBS, that is your radiology equipment, right? If you wanted to actually put the cost for the equipment in here, you can't go with the total cost, because an X-ray machine is not just used for MBS. In fact, that's just a very small portion of it. So the only way to fill in the numbers for MBS would be having to go to radiology, say, okay, how many hours are we using the equipment, and then how much does the equipment cost, how many hours will it last, and then proportionally, what cost can be associated with an MBS and therefore with speech pathology. That is a little bit more difficult to get these numbers, but if you have a facility that's open to looking into these things, then you can absolutely fill this out. We're actually going to leave it at 0 for now. Okay, so we're sort of tackling this, saying like, okay, for speech pathology as a department, there is no equipment cost as far as the MBS is concerned. So we'll leave that as at 0 here. Now, equipment purchase price. Our acute care card here that I'm sitting on right now with one endoscope is $17,500. So that's your entry level to have it on a rolling card, and I'm going to put that in here. Certainly, being aware of the challenges of starting a fees program, for us as a company that is so focused on SLPs, it is our goal to have something well below $20,000, because that's really where it is a little bit easier to utilize these cost savings and pay for the equipment that way. And we can put in a different number here in a little bit and see how that changes things. All right, so now the monthly equipment rental or lease price. That is if you don't purchase equipment, right? If you rent it or lease it, then you don't have the upfront expense, but rather a monthly fee. But we're looking at a purchase, so we're going to leave it at 0. Equipment maintenance cost per year. Usually I would say 10 to 15% of the purchase price for a 5-year time frame. So 10% is or 15 is roughly $2,000. If you divide that by 5, that's some $400 a year roughly. So I would say, okay, my maintenance cost per year might be $400 a year. Now, it's likely that it's going to be 0 in year 1, maybe 0 in year 2, and then it's going to be a little bit more. But on average, it could be something like $400. So now we see our fixed cost per month here already is $179.17. So that's good to know. And it's 0 on the MBS side because equipment is already there, and you're not looking at how much it's used for MBS. So far it's a challenge, right? Because you have that cost with fees, and this is why it is challenging to get a fees program started, because you're introducing this cost of $17,500 and these fixed costs per month, etc., to an environment where so far it's been 0. But we'll see what we end up with. Now we get to the variable cost for doing fees and MBS, and the most important part is labor, right? Staff that you have to pay. So for your facility, you would go in and see, okay, how much does the speech pathologist make here? How much does a radiologist make here? The radiology tech, etc. I am just going to go here and kind of look up the number. So let's say hourly wage, SLP in the US. Okay, so here we see $47.51 an hour on average. All right, so $47.51 is what I'm going to put in here, assuming that a fee study will take about an hour, right? With doing the study, setting it all up, scoping the patient, and then doing the review. Now, for the MBS, it'll be the same, right? The speech therapist is as involved here. If you say, you know what, it actually takes longer because you have to go down to radiology and waiting times and then review. If you say it's longer, you can increase it a little bit, but we're going to say, okay, it's the same time here. Now, radiologist, let's see. All right, radiology. Oh, this is radiology tech. Okay, well, that's good to know because we need that too. So radiology tech, let's say $30. Now, the radiology tech, which is here, might just be needed for half an hour. So we'll put $15 in here for that. Okay, and then this is yearly. Again, you would check with your facility what the exact number is. I just want to have something realistic here. Okay, so we're looking at $200 median. So let's go with that, and we'll say, okay, half an hour for a radiologist. So $100 for the radiologist right here. Okay, so then we have the nurse. Now, on the fee side, do we need the nurse? Do we not need the nurse? It all depends on how you do it, right? You might have the nurse there for feeding, or you might not. Certainly, radiologists and radiology tech, we don't need for fees. The nurse here, let's say, yeah, we're gonna utilize them for feeding. They need just a portion of the time, maybe, they'll just be $15 worth of time. And then with the MBS, if they're coming down to radiology, that is likely a little bit longer, so that might be a little bit higher, $25 for a study. And then we have the porter. So if the transport of the patient is done by yet another person, then they're getting paid something as well. And, that might be something like $7 or so. All right, so those are costs for all the labor involved with doing fees and doing MBS. Then we have feeding and cleaning supplies. So cleaning supplies per study on the fees, depending on how you do it. You might have an enzyme sponge that you want to use that's $2.70, and then some high-level disinfectant if that's how it's being cleaned, even if it's cleaned in central processing. So it's not very expensive. Maybe it's something like $3.50. And then you have the feeding supplies, so your applesauce, apple juice, crackers, green food dye, and whatever else you need. So maybe there's another $3, probably not as much, but we'll just put that in for now. And then on the MBS side, we might have no cleaning supplies, although I'm sure they do clean their equipment in radiology, but we'll leave that at zero. And then for the feeding supplies, you would have your barium, depending on how much that is. Maybe that costs you $8 per patient. Then we have outside transportation here. So this would be where a patient actually is not getting an MBS done in-house, sort of radiology in the basement, but rather at a different facility where they have to be transported there with an ambulance or something like that, where there can be a significant charge for these things. Let's say we're in acute care hospital, have our own X-ray equipment, so we're going to leave that as is. All right, so now we have our variable cost per study, which is just under $70 for fees and just over $200 for an MBS. And this is where the big difference, as you can tell already, comes from, right? Is that variable cost is really much higher with an MBS because of all the people involved for that study. And then you can see here our total variable cost per month is $2,000 roughly versus $6,000. So potentially you can save up to $4,000 per month when you do fees versus MBS. Now that we've filled out all the numbers here, we have our dashboard. So down here, the second tab, that's my dashboard. I click on that and it gives us a few different graphs here that we can look at. So the first one here is just sort of a graphic illustration of the cost, right? We have our fixed cost and variable cost. So fixed cost for MBS is 0. Monthly fixed cost fees in blue here. So it is there, but fairly low. Now this is the monthly fixed cost comes from the equipment cost, but divided over 10 years because that's the life of the equipment. But it also does include the maintenance cost that you need to pay to keep it running as well. And then we have the per study cost, fees, and MBS. And as you can see, from here, the longer you go, right? If you look at fees here versus MBS here, the more studies you do, the bigger the gap gets and the greater the cost savings are going to be. Now, the next graph over here, the one in the middle, total monthly cost, doesn't make a difference between fixed and variable in that sense. It mixes it all together. What's my total cost and how does fees compare to MBS? And where do these lines cross? Because they will cross because we have one where you have fixed cost, that's fees, and one where you don't have fixed cost, that's MBS. And because at 0 studies, you still have fixed costs with fees, right? So if you do 0 studies, fees is going to be more expensive. But then quickly, because the variable cost is so much lower of the fees, quickly when you start doing studies, these lines cross, and that's the breaking point of the two, and that's where we will have cost savings doing fees. And this here actually gives you the exact number. So we're looking at 1.34 number studies to reach the break-even point. Now you can't do 0.34 studies, so you always have to round that number up to the next full number, which is 2. So 2 studies per month, where you do fees versus MBS, you are saving money. You're starting at 2. If you do more and more and more, you're saving so much more money, right? And this is why, again, this delta gets bigger and bigger the more studies you do. And then last here, when we move over here, very important part, the capital recovery through cost savings. All right, so currently we're doing MBS. It costs us about $200 per study. Now, I want to introduce fees. Yes, we have to buy the equipment, but the variable cost is going to be so much lower that each study is only going to cost us $70. And so as long as we do our 2 studies a month, we're saving money. And if we do all 30 studies, because that's the demand that we put in there, it's like 30 studies, we can save so much more. And if we do the 30 a month, then we will have saved enough money to pay for all of the equipment, all the maintenance, and to that point for the variable costs, so the staff, et cetera as well, after 5.57 months. So this number here, 5.57, that's a timeline, right? After so many months, 5.57, the equipment, the entire equipment, the $17,500 will be paid for if you do 30 fees versus MBS per month. Right, so this is how that works. And now what happens when we change these numbers? Let's go back to our input and just change this a little bit. For example, if our radiologist doesn't make the median $200 per hour, but less, and it's maybe half our cost only $70, and you want a second endoscope. With ours, it's $5,000 extra, so you'll be looking at $22,500. All right, so now let's see what happens when we change things around like that. We go back here. This still just kind of gives us the breakout of the different the cost. Now, the total monthly cost here, as you can see, the number of studies that are required now to pay, to have cost savings with fees is 2.13. So remember, you have to round it up. So 3 studies per month. And then our capital recovery through the cost savings goes up to 8.8 months because our radiologist is not as expensive and we're trying to afford more equipment. Now, going back here again, this is a pretty standard setup for us. It's an acute care card system with a second endoscope that allows you to do back-to-back studies in a day, and for like a regular workload is a really good starting point. But of course, there is also other systems out there. This does not only work for Patco medical equipment. This calculator is neutral in that regard, so you can certainly look at other systems. So you can get a fees tower for $55,000. So if I put that in here and see how that makes a difference, you'll see that now you need to do at least 5 every month. So only the 5th study every month will actually allow you to get to cost savings with fees. And the capital recovery through the cost savings, it'll take you 22.05 months to pay for the equipment. And this is one of the biggest challenges when trying to start a fees program. If you can't show that it can pay off within 12 months, so one budget year, your chances of getting approved usually go down quite a bit. If you can show that within 12 months, this is paid for, then your chances are really, I think, much better to get approved. So yeah, you can see how this changes here. So in that way, for acute care, you can play with these numbers, fill in what's applicable to your facility, and hopefully make a strong case, show these graphs. People will understand and realize that you really put in a lot of thought into this. Now, let's leave acute care and go to a SNF, for example, right? So what if a skilled nursing facility wants to have their own equipment, afford their own equipment? How would that look like? Maybe they don't have 30 a month demand-wise, but they would still have 10 studies a month. Of course, there's the option of a mobile provider, which can be used here, and then that would be your only cost. Or buying your own equipment, you can look at this here as well. Now, let's see. Life expectancy in years, we'll leave that at 10. But instead of buying the equipment, we're going to look at this as a lease. So lease for our portable system is actually only $270 a month. That's for a $15,000 system. You don't get a card. You have the portable one in the case that you see in my back right there. And that would be $270 per month. The equipment maintenance per year be a little lower here, especially because you have a lower workload, and there would likely be the cleaning be done by the therapist. So, maybe we're looking at $200 here instead. Okay. Now, equipment, MBS, there's no equipment. I mean, a skilled nursing facility is probably not going to have radiology equipment oftentimes. And then they would also never buy it, right? So we're looking at you're actually sending someone to a hospital. Going down here to fees MBS, cost might be similar, right? So we'll leave the cost for a speech pathologist for an hour. Maybe in a they would work alone, or maybe not, but they might. And then for the MBS part, really you're not paying for the staff, because this is all hospital stuff, right? So this would all be zero here. The only other thing that potentially could happen is that the facility is being charged by the hospital. But even if they're not being charged and all of this is zero, there's going to be that transportation charge down here, right? And this might be, several hundreds of dollars sometimes. So, if we say there's $450 just for transportation on this, you can put that in here and then see what that looks like. Cleaning supplies, we're going to leave as is. And then we'll go back to our dashboard here. So in this case, you have the breakdown here. the monthly fixed cost for fees, but then also the per study cost of MBS, which is much higher. And then here we have the total monthly cost and our number, where they break. Now, because we're not buying equipment right now, we're doing a lease and we only pay $270 per month. It only requires us to do one study per month to have cost savings, doing fees versus sending out a patient, which might cost $450 in transportation to get an MBS done. Right? So in that sense, that can happen very, very quickly. Here, the capital recovery, again, we're not buying the equipment, right? So that's why basically you have a positive recovery of the monthly lease charge from month one. Now, what if transportation is not as expensive? As you go down in this, the numbers, of course, change a little bit. So when it's $300 for the transportation, here our total monthly cost shows that it will take you 2 studies per month to have cost savings doing fees versus sending a patient to a hospital for MBS. The capital recovery doesn't really change that much because, again, we're looking at a lease here, right? So as we go down even further, it'll take a little bit longer, right? So now it'll be 2 studies at least per month that you have to do to be able to save money with the MBS. So ultimately, as you can see, the variable cost of fees is so low that as long as you have a good cost saving between this number and this, you will be able to illustrate that having fees equipment really does make sense. So if we go way down and say, let's say instead of transportation, the SNF has their own bus transportation and it's not a separate charge. And then the hospital just charges $150 to get the MBS done. Something like that we could put in here instead of transportation. And then we see, okay, if that happens, then what? Still only need 3 studies per month to still be more affordable with your own fees equipment. And this is all due to the fact that you can have fees equipment for $270 per month, which is something that really, really helps. As you go up in those numbers, things change, of course. If we were to make this a purchase again, it's a $15,000 purchase, just be 0, then we are actually only looking at 2 studies again here to start these monthly cost saving because the variable cost is no different, but you are looking at a recovery time for your capital of, in this case, 20 months. So with those numbers right here, if you buy the equipment, it'll take the facility 20 months to pay for it. So you see, if you're in a skilled nursing facility, you use it slightly different. Those are the ways that you can really use this tool for different settings. We can take a quick look at what it would look like if this was a mobile provider here. Ultimately, you might just compare a flat fee that you charge as a mobile fees provider to that transportation charge or whatnot to the hospital. So if I'm a mobile fees provider and I charge, $350 here, and transportation costs are, $400, then pretty simple math, right? You're saving $50 per study, and then you're not buying any equipment, so this basically has no real purpose here. And total monthly cost, well, you're saving from the first study, right? Because you're really only having you pay as you go, essentially, when you need a study. What's more interesting is sort of the delta between the two lines. So the more studies you do, the more you save one over the other. So yeah, in that sense, you can use it a little bit for that as well. And of course, there could also be the mobile MBS charge. So if they charge, $500, then that might be that instead. And you can look at those numbers like that. So there's different ways to use the tool back and forth. And again, I really hope that it helps some people to understand how much a fees program and the doing fees can save as far as the money is concerned, and use this to illustrate to an administration at a hospital what the numbers look like, and then what does it look like in a graph form. And hopefully it will help a few people to make a strong case and ultimately get approved for a fees program. To this day, and I've done the fees equipment with SLPs for like a decade now. We're still looking at least 85, maybe 90% of the inquiries that we get are from facilities that have never had fees. So they're looking at for the very first time. And what that tells me is that a lot of those facilities, or the speech pathologists, or even an individual SLP, they don't get approved. They don't get approved in year one. They try to hopefully again year two, hopefully again year three, etc. So sometimes it takes several years to get these things approved. And thinking about how much you gain clinically doing fees, it's really too bad. And I think good affordable equipment paired with illustrating how that then helps the facility to save money can make a difference. So yeah, this is it. This is the end of this tool, really. Everything that I wanted to show you. Now, are there any questions that I can answer? No questions? No? Okay. Well, that's good. I always love to leave everyone without questions. Hopefully it means that I covered everything. So yeah, thank you very much for participating. If you have my contact information, please reach out. I'm always happy to fill these out, even one-on-one, or discuss further and help along the way. If you don't have my contact info, you can always reach us at info@patcommedical.com. And yeah, hopefully we'll talk soon. We'll hear from you, and have a great rest of your Sunday.